All right, I got my next character concept all ready to go.
Oh, really, Ted? What's that?
Rage Mage!
Man, that sounds awesome, but I don't think it's going to work, Ted. You can't cast spells while you're raging, and you can't concentrate on spells while you're raging either.
I'm sorry to tell you, Dave, but you are wrong. There's loads of spells that you can use while raging. So let's talk about D&D 5th edition Barbarian, things you can do while you rage.
Sounds like a plan. Welcome to Nerdarchy. For nerds, by nerds. I'm Nerdarchist Dave. And as always, I'm hanging out with this nerd.
Nerdarchy Ted.
Hey, maybe this is the first time hanging out in Ted's basement with us. It's a place where we like to discuss news, views, and homebrews for 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. And sometimes we talk about other role-playing games too.
If you don't want to miss a single video, then don't forget to hit that subscribe button and to tune to that notification bell. As we pointed out, we're going to talk about raging and all the different things that you can be able to do while raging.
So there's a couple limitations when it comes to rage. One, you have to make strength-based attacks to benefit from your extra rage damage. You can't cast spells while raging, and you cannot concentrate on spells while raging either.
All right, so I gotta interject one more thing. In order to continue raging, you need to either be making attacks or taking damage to continue that process.
Now, we actually came up with a bunch of things that you can combine with raging. Now, they might have their own requirements. For instance, we know that in order to get your rage damage, you need to make a strength-based attack. Now, say you wanted to use another class ability like sneak attack, which you can totally do while you're raging, but it has to be with a light weapon or a finesse weapon in order to get that sneak attack damage. And, you know, there's other requirements as well, as like having an ally within 5 foot of the enemy. Advantage. So there's a couple ways, but as long as you meet all the prereqs, you can actually combine these. And that's what this video is going to be about. We're going to go through the different character classes, and we're going to talk about how you can combine some of their abilities with Barbarian Rage. Before we go any further, let us take a moment so our sponsor doesn't fly into a rage and talk about D&D Beyond, because with D&D Beyond, making this video was so much easier. But know what else it makes easy? Making your characters, building your campaigns, altering and creating new monsters. There's so much goodness over on the D&D Beyond website. You guys need to check it out.
If that's not enough, there's plenty of free content between articles and videos. D&D Beyond, the sponsor of this video. Go check them out. They're awesome.
Link in the description.
All right. So, it looks like we're going to go in order here. So first up is going to be Bard.
Yeah, Bard is really awesome because one of their hallmark abilities is Bardic Inspiration, right? And you can give it out as a bonus action. A lot of times as a Barbarian, you don't have anything to do with that bonus action. So you can be giving it to other people. And then if you look into the subclasses, sometimes you can activate your Bardic Inspiration to do extra things, like the College of Whispers, where you can do extra damage. So you would definitely be able to do that, or you can just be giving it out to, to your allies, or using your reactions with cutting words. All great things that can be done, but that's not all.
So the other things that are there are a load of spells, as I kind of talked about in the intro, that are going to get used. And we're going to get into all the different spell options later. So we'll touch back on that point.
Absolutely. So next up, we have the Cleric.
Now, Cleric, Channel Divinity, doesn't say you're casting a spell. You are just channeling the divine energy. So, boom, you present your holy symbol. You've got a way to continue that rage going. There's nothing stopping you.
Now, one of the tricks to that is if it doesn't involve making attack or you don't take any damage, you are in danger of coming out of your rage. But that being said, you can still do Channel Divinities.
Sometimes it's going to be worth it. And come on, how many times have you ever found a barbarian who ran out of rages?
That's a good point, Ted. I have rarely seen it at my table. And again, of course, a cleric is a spellcaster. They're going to have spells. We'll get into that later.
Next up is Druid. What do Druids like to do? They like to turn into fun, cool stuff. So what's more interesting than turning into a bear and raging all up on your monster's enemies?
Yeah, this is a great tactic. This is a great combination. You're going to also be able to use your spells while you're raging. Sort of. if you're Circle of the Moon.
Right.
Because Circle of the Moon can actually sack out spells in order to heal their beast form, which normally a barbarian isn't going to be able to do, but because you're not actually casting a spell or concentrating on a spell, you're going to make use of those spells while you're wild shaping. Now, that's a kind of like a generic overview of the druid. If you then start going through the subclasses, and this applies to everything on our list, you're going to find even more opportunities to use abilities while you rage. For the druid, for a druid, there's an ability called Court of the Summer Bomb, and that's a healing ability, but it's not actually a spellcasting ability, so you might actually be able to get that one off. But like I said, you're going to have to look and just make sure you meet all the requirements and you can mix and match.
Absolutely.
Obviously, druids are spellcasters, so like we said, later.
So next up is going to be fighter, and everything in fighter is going to wind up stacking with barbarians because, let's face it, the fighter is beaten down on stuff. So things like your fighting styles, your action surges, that kind of stuff, it's just, goes without saying.
This one is actually the opposite of most of the other classes. In most of the other classes, you can find other opportunities to use that rage in conjunction with class features, right? Well, with the fighter, it kind of works the other way. It's like Eldritch Knight is going to be the one that doesn't have a lot of crossover with your barbarian.
Right. So next up is monk.
So monk, all right, perfect. You can rage and you can kung fu fight at the same time. You're going to be able to apply your martial arts, your stunning strike, as well as your kai features as a monk. Here's another one of those areas where you're going to have to really pay attention to the requirements of each particular ability as well as rage. So you might not be able to use your abilities as a monk with every kind of weapon. You may not actually be able to get your rage damage because of unarmed strikes. But what you can do is mix and match those martial arts weapons and just make sure you're making strength-based attacks.
Yeah, the one here is if you go, the 4 elements monk, this one is going to be, it's going to severely limit what you can do because a lot of those things are, look like spells or spell-like abilities. So it's going to be, iffy.
Yeah, all your magic subclasses are going to limit you as far as what you can mix and match. Although there's still some options when we get to spells. Next up, we've got the Paladin. All right, so we already mentioned some things for the Paladin.
So Paladin, you can smite all day long. It doesn't matter if you're raging because you're sacrificing the spell, not actually casting it. So it works out pretty well.
And then the thing that we had already mentioned was the Channel Divinity. So same thing for the cleric and the paladin. It works exactly the same.
Next up is ranger, and ranger is another martial class. They do have spells, most of which aren't going to really apply here, but there are a couple that might fall into usefulness here. But if you happen to be playing a beast companion or a beastmaster ranger, you can be able to command your beast companion to fight alongside of you. Because let's face it, you're doing damage, so it should work.
Also, as we mentioned, as the beast companion ranger, you get to command your beast, but also other ranger abilities like fighting styles is going to always come into play. So there's definitely some options there.
Rogue, short and sweet. You've got your ability to sneak attack, as Dave already said, and you're also going to be able to use those cunning actions.
Yep, cunning actions. You're also going to have evasion, uncanny dodge. There's a bunch of things that are going to cross over nicely with the barbarian, whether you rage or not. So now that brings us to sorcerer. Sorry, sorcerer. The only thing we got essentially is going to be spells for the most part. I mean, you can look and cherry pick some class features, but the bulk of being a sorcerer is all about casting spells. So you're gonna have to figure out what spells are going to qualify, and we're going to talk about spells in a bit.
And if you go with the Draconic, you've got the ability to have your scales. So if you've got that low Constitution modifier, you can be able to derive your armor class from your sorcery ability as opposed to your Con plus Dex.
Next up is, a fan favorite, and that is the Warlock. So Warlock spells, okay, we'll get into that in a bit. But then you have invocations. You can definitely cherry pick different invocations as well as different class features that you're going to be combining with your Barbarian. And you can use them while you rage. And also it might be a fun combination. I think the Barbarian Warlock is a bit odd, but, it would definitely work from a creepier tribe.
If you went with Pact of the Blade, that definitely is more of the martial, and it's going to mix well with the barbarian abilities.
Last but not least, we have the wizard. And of course, the wizard is all about spells. So we should just roll right into that section and start talking about spells.
All right. So Dave, you went and put together a list of awesome spells that you can wind up using while you're raging. So I'm going to guess these are things that you cast a spell, they don't require concentration, and then you start your rage.
Exactly. Basically, there are spells that last a minute, 10 minutes, an hour, 8 hours, and 24 hours. Some of them are quite high level, so it would be really hard to mix and match the classes. But that being said, any of these spells, they have a duration. There's not concentration. You could cast them. You could layer them on yourself, especially if you have a couple rounds to play with, and then you could go into your rage and use them quite effectively.
It's a silly combination, but you get 9th level spells at 17th level. So that still gives you access to 9th level spells and 3 levels of Barbarian to play with.
And I also think the highest level spell we actually got was an 8th level spell anyway. So you wouldn't even need need it.
All right, so we got 5 levels of Barbarian to play with for a ridiculous combination. So let's dive into it.
All right. So we've got a total of 14 spells. And to be honest with you, I ignored a lot of spells that I said, this spell doesn't have a direct combat application, so there's no reason for a barbarian to cast this spell and then rage. But that being said, they could have cast it and something happens and now they're raging. So it would still technically be going on, but it just didn't meet the qualifications for the sake of this video.
With those, you have things like Blink, you have Jump. You know, both things have the capacity to be useful in and out of combat. All right, we have 4 spells that have a duration of 1 minute. We have Blink, we have Jump, we have Mirror Image, and we have Spiritual Weapon.
Now, 3 of those spells can be garnered from all over the place, different arcane castings. That Spiritual Weapon is clearly a cleric spell, so you know, for that raging cleric, they can have their spiritual weapon going on while they're beating things with their greatsword.
So spiritual weapon is a bonus action to cast, so it's pretty useful to get in there. You just have to cast it before you start your rage.
Exactly. Next up, we have 1 spell for our 10-minute duration, and that's Fire Shield. It's going to give you defensive properties if you're not Totem of the Bear and already have resistance to fire and cold. It's also going to give you a bit of offensive capabilities as well. So our real bread and butter, though, is those hour spells, and there's a bunch of them that are going to be super useful for a barbarian while he's raging.
So there's 6 spells that fall into this, and this is going to have the potential, depending upon how your games go, of winding up lasting through multiple combats.
So Armor of Agathis, Crown of Stars, and False Life are all great spells that last an hour that a barbarian would benefit by casting them before raging.
We also have Long Stride, Regenerate, and See Invisibility. So you're always going to be able to benefit from more movement. You're always going to be able to benefit from having your wounds knit back together, including, you know, picking your arm up and reattaching it, or, you know, the ability to see invisible foes.
Next up, we want to dive into those spells that have a duration of 8 hours, and there's 2 of them.
So we have Mage Armor and Non-Detection. Now, Mage Armor is not going to stack with your Barbarian, unarmored defense, but it's definitely another way if you wind up having, you know, those lower stats. Next, we have the last category, and that's spells that last for 24 hours.
We get a whopping 1, and it's Mind Blank. But it's a great spell for fortifying those mental defenses, which is oftentimes a weakness of the barbarian.
So there we go. We're wrapped up. We got all of those awesome abilities from classes, all of those fantastic spell options that don't require concentration. So you want to mix it up. You want to add barbarian to any of those other great classes that are out there. Here's a way to do it.
So let us know what you think. We got a place for it. That is down in the comments below. While you're at it, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
On your way down to that, stop by the description and check out the link to the awesome people over at D&D Beyond.
So until next time,
stay nerdy.